Welcome again to our students at Baverstock in the city. Before we look at this video, I would like to remind you that you can pause or rewind the video whenever you want to. This video is going to look at how we should structure a paragraph in our writing. We need to know how to do this for our exam, for question 2 of paper 1 and for both questions of paper 2. Before we look at how we should structure a paragraph in our writing, we need to know what is a paragraph. Well, a paragraph is usually a group of sentences about one main idea. It can be as short or as long as we like, as long as the idea we have been writing about has been fully explored, or explored as much as we want it to be. As long as we follow certain rules, we are in control of what we put in the paragraph and how much we put in the paragraph. So what do we need to make a good paragraph? Well, like a juicy burger, a good paragraph needs 2 things to hold it together. It needs a topic sentence and it needs a concluding sentence. So like our juicy hamburger, which needs a top bun and it needs a bottom bun, our good paragraph needs a topic sentence and it needs a concluding sentence. Why do we need paragraphs? Well, they break up long chunks of writing, making it clearer and more interesting for the reader. They provide a clear structure and order to our writing. And if we have a look at this writing below here in brown, this has not been paragraphed. So let's just have a look at it. Paragraphs form a very important part of almost any type of writing in English. They have been used for hundreds of years in all different languages for some of the following reasons. The main reason to use paragraphs is to show where the writer has finished talking about one point and has moved on to talk about a new one. They show a different topic, time, or person. Where there is speech in writing, each sentence spoken by a different character should be in a different paragraph to help the reader see who is talking. Again, without this, the writing is too difficult to read. A section of writing which includes paragraphs will be far quicker and easier to read than one which hasn't. People who don't use paragraphs are at risk of not being understood by their reader. If we have a look here, I've corrected what we have just looked at on the previous slide, and I've put paragraphs in it. Paragraphs form a very important part of almost any type of writing in English. They have been used for hundreds of years in all different languages for some of the following reasons. And here, as you will see, I've inserted a paragraph space, and we begin the new paragraph here. The main reason to use paragraphs is to show where the writer has finished talking about one point and has moved on to talk about a new one. They show a different topic, a different time, or a different person. Again, I've put a paragraph break here, and the new paragraph begins just here. Where there is speech in writing, each sentence spoken by a different character should be in a different paragraph to help the reader see who is talking. Again, without this, the writing is too difficult to read. And again, I've inserted a paragraph break just here and began the new paragraph here. A section of writing which includes paragraphs will be far quicker and easier to read than one which hasn't. People who don't use paragraphs are at risk of not being understood by their reader. I think you can see that that is much clearer and much easier for a reader to read and understand. So what should be in a paragraph? P. Let's have a look here. The P is for the point. It's the top bun. This should state the topic or the point of the paragraph clearly and briefly. Mrs. Stokes believes that, and then she goes on to make her point. The E, the first E in the paragraph is evidence. And this is like the meat in the bun, the burger. This should add detail to our topic sentence and give examples of why we think we are right. So we've made our point. Mrs. Stokes believes that. The evidence, this is because, and then we go on to show some evidence. The second E of P is the explanation, and that is the bottom bun. What our evidence means, why it explains our point, and it may be a concluding statement. So we've made our point, Mrs. Stokes believes that. We've given some evidence, this is because. Our concluding statement, or what our evidence means, our explanation, this makes Birmingham something. So let's have a look what we actually wrote here. Mrs. Stokes believes that Birmingham is the best city in Britain. This is because Birmingham has excellent transport links, is clean and well managed, and has very high standards of education, especially if you're taught by Mr. Lewis or Miss Pettit at Baverstock in the city. This all makes Birmingham a very desirable place to live. And what you can see here, here's the point. Mrs. Stokes believes that Birmingham is the best city in Britain. We then go on to our evidence, and here's our evidence. This is because Birmingham has excellent transport links, is clean and well managed, and has very high standards of education, especially if you're taught by Mr. Lewis or Miss Pettit at Baverstock in the city. Here is our final explanation, concluding part to this paragraph. This all makes Birmingham a very desirable place to live. We have the point, we have the evidence, and we have the explanation. We have P. Earlier, we looked to see what a paragraph actually is, and we looked that a paragraph is usually a few sentences in it. And here we can see a paragraph may be many sentences long or contain just one sentence. We might use a one-sentence paragraph for effect or emphasis. The next day, the dog was well again. One sentence creates great effect and emphasises that maybe in the previous paragraph the dog was very ill. Now he is well again. However, we mustn't use one-sentence paragraphs too often, otherwise they lose their effect. So that is something that we do need to remember. Don't use them too often. How do we know when one paragraph ends and another begins? Well, there are two ways to show where a new paragraph begins. The first way is to indent the first word. It starts further in, leaving a gap so that the new paragraph is easily seen. That's called indenting. So let's look at the example. Got a new paragraph starting. We start the first word, we, further in from the margin. We left home at 7:30 a.m. and waited for the bus to take us to school. John had forgotten his, and then the paragraph continues. The point being here is that we have shown what a new paragraph is beginning because we've indented the first word. We've started it further in from the margin so that the reader can see that we've got a new paragraph here. The second way is to leave one line between each paragraph, as we saw earlier in this video with this text here. Paragraphs form a very important part of almost any type of writing in English. They have been used for hundreds of years in all different languages for some of the following reasons. We leave a space between the paragraph and we leave it just there. So that makes it very clear for the reader to see that we've finished this paragraph and we're now about to start on this one. The main reason to use paragraphs is to show where the writer has finished talking about one point and has moved on to talk about a new one. They show a different topic, time, or person. To continue with how do we know when one paragraph ends and another begins, I just want to tell you that either way is acceptable. You can indent the first word so you're leaving a gap at the beginning of the first line of the paragraph, or you can leave a space between each paragraph. Either way is acceptable, but whichever way we choose, we must be consistent. We either indent the first word or we leave a space between each paragraph. I prefer to leave one line between each paragraph, as I think that it looks neater and it also separates each paragraph more clearly for the reader. But this is a personal choice. We should decide for ourselves which method to use. When should we begin a new paragraph? There's another simple method that we can use to help us remember when to start a new paragraph, and I've called this Top Tips. We will briefly have a look at top tips on this slide and then we will explore each one in more detail. The first of our top tips is topic. If we are going to begin a new topic, we would begin a new paragraph. The next part of our top tips is person. If we're going to start talking about a new person in our writing, we would begin with a new paragraph. The third part of our top tips is time. If we're going to start talking about a different time frame, then we would begin a new paragraph. The fourth part of our top tips is place. If we're going to talk about a new place in our writing, then we would begin a new paragraph. And our final top tip is speaker. If a new person is going to speak in the paragraph, we would begin the spoken speech in a new paragraph. Let's have a look now at these in more detail. The first of our top tips is topic. We need a new paragraph when we change the topic we are writing about. So let's have a look at the example here. Cats are now the most popular pet in Britain, maybe because they are independent and don't need much looking after. Dogs, on the other hand, need a lot of attention and have to be taken for a walk at least once a day. So in this first paragraph, we're talking about cats. In the second paragraph, we're talking about dogs. We have a change of topic, we have a change from cats to dogs, and we have put a new paragraph there, a paragraph space between paragraph 1, which we're talking about cats, paragraph 2, we're talking about dogs, change of topic, new paragraph, and the way I have done it is to leave the space between the two paragraphs. The second of our top tips is person. We need a new paragraph when we want to write about a different person. So let's have a look at the example. In spite of all her good deeds and caring nature, Helen never really warmed to Mrs. Pegg. With Mr. Pegg, however, things were completely different. So what we have here is one paragraph where we are talking about Mrs. Pegg. The second paragraph we are talking about Mr. Pegg. We have a change of person. We therefore need a new paragraph. Between paragraph 1 and paragraph 2, we have left a space to indicate to the reader that we are on a new paragraph here. The third of our top tips is time. So let's have a look at the example, how we need a new paragraph when we have a different time frame to write about. During the summer, Jane found she had plenty of time to help at the animal sanctuary. The summer holidays seemed to last forever, and even when she was at school, the warm nights meant it was fun working outdoors with the cats and dogs. However, when winter came, bringing with it the cold, dark nights, Jane found she had less time to devote to the animals. You can see that in paragraph 1, we are referring to the summer. In paragraph 2, we are talking about winter. We have a different time frame in each paragraph, so we needed 2 paragraphs, and I have put the space between each paragraph to show that we have paragraph 1 here, space, paragraph 2 here. The fourth top tip is place. We need a new paragraph when we want to write about a different place. So let's have a look at the example that we've got here. The classroom was dark and dingy, with a sour smell that seemed to be coming from the drains. Bob said he thought the smell was coming from the new teacher. The playground, however, was a different story. Bright and cheerful, with lovely green banks to roll down, and even a place to play football. You can see in paragraph 1, we're talking about the classroom. In paragraph 2, we're talking about the playground. We have a different place. Because we have a different place, we need to have a new paragraph. Paragraph 1, talking about the classroom. Paragraph 2 is talking about the playground. We have a space between the 2 paragraphs to tell the reader that we are putting a new paragraph because we are discussing a different place. Our final top tip is speaker. When we are writing speech, we need a new paragraph when another speaker begins to speak. So let's look at the example again. Grace was watching Joe as he struggled with his maths homework. "You are making a mess of that," said Grace. "I know," said Joe. "Can you help me with it, please?" Now what you can see here is we've got just a statement that is telling us that Grace is watching Joe as he struggles with his homework. We now begin the speech here. "You are making a mess of that," said Grace. We've begun the speech there. That is Grace speaking. Now we've got Joe speaking here. "I know," said Joe. "Can you help me with it, please?" So you can see what we've done here. We've got Grace speaking here. We've got somebody else speaking here. We've got Joe speaking. We have left a space between those 2 people speaking to let the reader know that we have another person who is going to begin to speak just here. Before we finish, we'll just have a look at some exam tips that refer to paragraphs. In the exam, if you get to the end of your work and you realise that you've forgotten to put your work into paragraphs, all is not lost. But you do need to show the examiner where you would have put your paragraphs, and this is done by drawing 2 diagonal lines like this, where the break should have been. So let's have a look how I've done it here to show you where you would put it in the exam if you'd forgotten to put your work into paragraphs. John believes that forcing students to wear an uncomfortable uniform is wrong. However, he realises that some people feel differently about uniform and believe its benefits outweigh its negative points. Now, we do need a new paragraph just here because we've gone on to talk about John, who believes that students shouldn't wear uniform, and then we are changing to John realising that some people feel differently about uniform. We need a new paragraph just there, and you would put those 2 diagonal lines to show the examiner that that is where you would have had a paragraph break. That is all for this video, but in our next video we will look at how we can make our paragraphs even more interesting and so gain more marks in the exam. We must continue to work hard and practice our writing, and we will do well. Good luck.